Hey everyone, if you're like me and you're reading an article about GWP or global warming potential of refrigerants and the article starts referring to CO2 equivalent in metric tons, and you're left trying to figure out what all that really means, then this video is for you. Or perhaps you were just curious as to how a pound of your favorite refrigerant stacks up to a metric ton of CO2. Well, you're in luck because this video is also for you. So let's get started. The first step of the process is to figure out how many pounds US standard there are in a metric ton. There are, as it turns out, 0.0004536 pounds in a metric ton, so we can use that as our constant. The next step in the process is to multiply the GWP number, or global warming potential number, by our constant to find out what 1 pound of refrigerant is compared to a metric ton of CO2. Follow along as I go through the tables of refrigerants and show you the CO2 equivalent tonnage. On the left-hand column, you're seeing the refrigerants in 1 pound increments. These are the most popular refrigerants out there. In the middle column, I'm showing you the GWP, or the global warming potential number. And then in the right-hand column, I'm showing you the metric ton CO2 equivalent after I've calculated it out. So starting with 410A, we have 1 pound of 410A, and the global warming potential for that is 2087. So if I multiply that by our constant, I come up with 0.95 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. 404A is another really popular refrigerant, so 1 pound of 404A is equal to about 1.78 metric tons of CO2. R22 is equal to roughly about 0.82 metric tons of CO2. R134A is equal to 0.65 metric tons of CO2. And then I wanted to throw in some A2L refrigerants, the new substitutes that we'll be seeing in the very near future. So R32 with a global warming potential of 675 comes in at 0.31 metric tons of CO2 equivalency. R454B has a GWP number of 465, and so that's 0.21 metric tons of CO2 equivalency. And then for fun, I wanted to throw in a really large GWP number, so I went with R12. R12 has a GWP number of 10,900, and so 1 pound of R12, if it leaks out into the atmosphere, is equivalent to 5 metric tons of CO2. Moving forward in our table, we'll start with two refrigerants that are very similar, R1234YF and R1234ZE. Both of these refrigerants have extremely low GWP numbers of 1, and so they would be equivalent to 0.0004536 metric tons of CO2. The next couple down, we have R448A and R449A. Both of these come in at a mid-range GWP number, and they are equal to about 0.63 metric tons of CO2. We also have 407C, and that's equal to about 0.80 metric tons of CO2. And then I also wanted to show some A3 refrigerants on these tables just so we can kind of compare the GWP numbers and the metric tons of CO2. So R290, otherwise known as propane, has a GWP number of 3, and so it would be equal to 0.0013 metric tons of CO2. And R600A, or isobutane, also has a GWP number of 3, so therefore it would also have a 0.0013 metric tons of CO2 equivalency. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more.